Hi everyone, Nightingale here from Nightingale Guitars. I've got a quick video for you on how to do the bracing on the top of an acoustic guitar, and also how to make a few small changes to the bracing and the reasons that you might want to do that. So here I've got my full scale drawing and I've got all my bracing mapped out. I've got the size of all my braces and the layout, how it's actually going to be, and so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom it in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so here are my full scale plans, and I hope you can see that fairly clearly on the camera. Hopefully you can see enough to understand what I'm saying about this drawing. And so this bracing pattern is the traditional bracing pattern taken from, I took this from a Martin Dreadnought full scale set of plans I bought. And so this is a very traditional kind of bracing layout, but the only difference is I've gone for quite a bit of a longer scale length because this is a long scale guitar, and so I've had to move my X bracing around and I've had to move it down to get this bridge patch in the right place for the saddle and the pegs to all line up with where the scale length line is going to be. So that's one thing you might want to do, is make sure that your bracing all lines up and your bridge patch all lines up with where your scale length and your bridge is going to line up with eventually. Now the change I'm going to make to this bracing pattern today is just I'm going to put one extra brace. I don't want to go too far away from the traditional layout today, but what I am going to do is I'm going to put one extra brace in just right down the center line here, and that will just touch the bridge patch here, and it will just touch the tail block here, and it's going to be a small brace, quite narrow and quite short. And the reason I'm putting that in is because one of my previous guitars, I took it all around the world with me, and it went to a hot dry climate and then a humid climate, and all this heat and moisture and everything, all the changes, actually eventually made the center joint of the top actually come apart. And so that's made me think, actually what I'd quite like to do is reinforce this center joint with a brace, and so that's the reason that I am putting this in. So basically it's just going to be a 10mm wide brace, so I'll just plot that in there, 10mm, and join that together. Okay, that's all good to go. And here I've got my spruce, and that came in a quarter sawn wedge, and I've just cut it up on the bandsaw into these pieces, ready to cut into smaller strips to make my blanks, if you like, that are going to form all my braces. So my next step is to go ahead, take measurements from my drawing, take measurements everywhere, and cut up my quarter sawn pieces into smaller strips that are going to then make up my braces. Okay, I've got all of my brace blanks done, and I've got them all laid out on my plan here, so I've got an idea of where everything's going and making sure everything's in the right place, and I've got all of the brace that I need to complete the top. And these are all the kind of proper braces, if you like, and here to one side I've got some thin pieces of Douglas fir and some thin spruce. It's all quarter sawn. The spruce is for the bridge patch here, and the Douglas fir is just going to make some reinforcement around the sound hole and a bit further up. So I've got those strips ready to go in there as well. So the next stage is just to move over to the radius dish. Okay, so this is a radius dish, and this is a 28-foot radius dish. Usually it's going to be 28 foot or 30 foot, something like that, for a top. And so I'm going to use this as my guide to lay all my braces out to. So I'm just going to take a pencil and get my brace in the dish and just mark along it, rough idea of the curve that I'm going to need to put onto it. So now I've got my line along my brace, I can go ahead and just plane roughly to that line. Okay, so now I've planed a slight curve on the bottom of that, and it roughly fits into my dish. Just a slight gap under there, but I'm going to fine tune that now. And another thing to add is I'm putting this in the position that it's going to be finally. So this next one I would do that in that position, and little finger braces I would do that in that position, so that you're always kind of doing it in the position it's going to end up in on the top, so it's conforming to that particular part of the dome, and that helps to form an even kind of dome when it's all finished. So anyway, this brace here needs to be sanded, so I'm going to get a bit of 80 grit paper here on the radius dish. I'm just going to get the brace on top of there, make sure it's relatively flat, and just if you look into the light, you can see the sanding scratches, and when you've got sanding scratches all the way along, you can tell that you've managed to hit all parts of the dish. And so there you go, that's a pretty good fit. And so what I need to do now is go ahead and do that same process for every single one of my braces, so all my braces are domed into this shape. Okay, so I've just finished radiusing the bottom of all my braces, just finished doing all that in the radius dish, and the next thing to do is to work on this joint in the middle. And so what I've done is I've raised up this brace and just put 2 offcuts underneath it to hold it level, and lined it all through perfectly with my drawing, and made sure that these are in the right distance, in the right location that way, because that's going to set where they actually end up. So then I can just hold all of this down and just carefully mark where that joint's going to be. Okay, I went ahead and I cut that out, the little slot in the middle there, and I did that using a Japanese model maker saw and a small chisel. And the next thing to do once you've cut that slot is to get your brace in there, check it's all in the right position, and all you have to do is just hold that together and put your marks on the other side of that joint, and go ahead and repeat that process on the other piece. Okay, I've cut the slot in the bottom of this one, and these 2 braces now fit together nicely, and should make sure that the bottom's nice and flush. It's not going to hold the other one brace isn't going to hold the other one off, and also it's not, you haven't gone too far and there's not a step there now, so they should be nice and flush. And when you've got that nicely done, the next thing to do is just to lay it back over your plans, get it lined up in the right position, and just mark where all of these little intersections are here, so where all the finger braces are going to intersect your X bracing, and mark all of these little finger braces here as well, and also these ones over on this side need to be marked. Okay, so now they're all marked up, I know that I'm going to sand the end of this brace down to 3mm high, so I know that this little intersection here, or all these little intersections, need to be 3mm deep, and I do them 3mm deep by 3mm into the brace, and that just allows the end of each of these braces to just tuck under there and get glued in place. And so now I've got all that marked out, I'm going to go ahead and cut all of those little rebates. Okay, one little trick to add just into this is I've got my marking gauge here set to 3mm, and the reason I like doing it like this because you can basically, that's set 3mm, you can mark on that side 3mm, you can flip it over onto the bottom, you can mark that side 3mm, and that's it. You've got the height and the depth of your rebate set, and you can do that for all of them then, just quickly, height and depth. And then it's literally as quick and as simple as that to mark out all of your rebates. As you can see, I've finished the little rebates on this brace, and they're all set to 3mm like I said, so all I need to do now is make sure that the end of each of these braces actually is 3mm, so it fits nice and neatly into that little rebate that I've made. And the next job for me to do is just to start marking some of the curves onto the braces, because I like to put a little bit of shape onto the braces before I actually glue them onto the top. So I've just got this little bracing curve template that I've made, and I like to use that to mark some of the curves on here. And really, with the much smaller braces, the little mini finger braces, I just do that by eye, but just making sure that the end of each one is 3mm where it's going into a rebate. I've just finished putting all the curves on all the braces. There's an example, quite traditional, quite typical, and I've also put some extra curves on here as well. I've also trial fitted each of these little joints to make sure they all fit nicely. You can kind of see that's fairly tight because that will stay on there, so it's nice. Make sure they're nice tight fit all the way around. And the other thing I've done is I just took the face of each brace, both faces, and sanded it onto some 180 grit sandpaper just to get any pencil marks off the face, because once it's glued on to your top, it's quite a struggle to get into that corner to clean the thing up. So it's easier to do it now, get all the marks off of that face, makes life easier down the road. And I've got these little tunnels going on in these braces to allow this central brace to go underneath, and because I'm never going to get to that again once it's glued on, I've just really shaped and sanded that to 240 under there, so that's kind of almost finished now because I'm never going to get to that again. So now I've done all of that, the next thing to do is to just move some of this out of the way for a minute, and I'm just going to go ahead and trace the bridge patch. So I'm going to trace the bridge patch, I'm going to trace it onto this 3mm piece of spruce, and I'm going to cut it out because I need to get this bridge patch made up before I go and glue any braces on. Okay, I've got my bridge patch made now, and the next thing to do is this big brace that goes at the top of the guitar underneath the end of the fretboard. What you need is, well, if your truss rod comes down and is adjusted through the sound hole, you're going to need a hole in this brace so you can get an Allen key through the hole to allow you to adjust that truss rod. So basically, I've got my neck blank here, and I've got my truss rod loose fitting in there, but I can measure down from the face to the center of the Allen key bolt is 12mm, and then I also have my top here, and the top's going to end up flush to the surface of the neck there, and so my top is almost exactly 3mm thick, and so I've got 12mm from the face of here to the center of here. I need to take off the thickness of my top, which is 3mm, so I'm gonna mark 9mm from here, from the underside of this brace to the center of the hole I'm going to drill. It's going to be 9mm. Hope that makes sense. And I'm going to put it right in the middle, so centrally there, and 9mm up. And I'm going to go ahead and I drill just about maybe an 8mm hole to allow that to go through, or allow an Allen key, sorry, to go through that. So now I've got that marked, I'm going to go ahead and drill that on the drill press.